بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن So inshallah, this is the second lecture of week 3 from ICS 104. So any question on the material before we proceed? Okay. Right. So we stopped at strings, and inshallah we will now proceed with strings. So we saw how, the last thing that we did was, how do we print a quote or a double quote, knowing that, a string needs to be enclosed in a single quote or a double quote. Now we will talk about the number of characters in a string or the length of a string. Basically, the length of a string is the number of characters in that string. For example, Harry is of length. What's the length of Harry?
5.
5, huh? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And world is of length 2, 3, 4, also 5, huh? طيب, an empty string is going to be of length
0.
It's going to be of length 0, right? And we will write an empty string as double quotes after each other. There is no space, by the way, in between. Okay, there is no space in between, or a single quote followed by a single quote immediately. Okay, so this is basically an empty string. Python provides the function len, which returns the length of the argument string. So, for example, if I run this, len world, of course, there is a exclamation mark after it. So if I run it, shift enter, it will give a 6. Okay, it will give. Right. What about string concatenation? Well, concatenation means if we want to, paste a string next to each other. So given two strings, such as Ahmed and Salim, you can concatenate them to one long string. And what are we going to use? We're going to use the plus sign, okay? The plus sign. So, this plus sign will be considered the concatenation operator if both arguments are strings. If both arguments are strings. Now, what do you think will be printed here?
It will be mixed together, the Ahmed and Salim.
Is there a space between them?
No.
See, since there is no space before S, no space after D, there will be printed right, basically, connected to each other. They will be printed connected to each other. If I want to separate them with a space, then either I add plus, a space plus the second name, or I need to introduce a space, at the end of the first name or at the beginning of the second, word. I would prefer the first solution, which is basically add a space between them. So first name plus space plus second name. So note that if one of the operands of the plus operator is a string, then all of them should be strings. Otherwise, the syntax error will occur. So, for example, if we have, in this case, instead of second name, let's have a third variable here. Second name 1 equals 2 or equals 3, right? And let's change this like this. Or what will happen? You will see that there is an error. Okay, so once one of the variables is the string, all of them have to be strings. Right. What does the CHR function do? Well, the CHR function will basically print the character that resides in the code or in the storage location 1710 in the Unicode. Okay, in the Unicode. So, for example, if you press Shift Enter, you will be surprised that this is basically this letter, right? Um, all the English letters, for example, I think if you go with 90, if you go with 90, we might get an English letter. Yes, this is the English letter, capital Z. Okay, so each character has an index. It's you can think of it as each character has an index. You know, a long time ago, before Unicode, it was ASCII, and ASCII was only using 8 bits, 8 bits, you know, to store. So you will have from only from 0 to 127. Okay, the range was from 0 to 127. But Unicode now uses 2 bytes, 16 characters. So the limit is much, the range now is much bigger with the Unicode characters. Okay. طيب. Now, what do you think will be printed if I say 89?
Why?
Capital Y, صح?
Yes.
Capital Y. And you will go all the way until you reach, you know, capital A. You would know, you know, what is the code of capital A. Then you have the small letters, by the way, come after the capital letters. So if I have, for example, 100, now you will see, for example, the small letters appear. Okay, so you have the capital letters and then come before the small letters. واضح يا شباب؟ Okay. طيب, string repetition. So given a string such as, you know, the hyphen, you can repeat it n times, where n is an integer, using the string repetition operator times. So just like plus, you know, concatenates, times multiplies, okay, repeats, times multiplies or repeats. So for example, dashes equals, you know, this string multiplied by 50. So when I print dashes, shift enter, what do I have? All the dashes printed. Okay, all the dashes printed. طيب, can I change this to like Ahmed? Can I do that?
Yes.
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 Yes, and what will be printed?
Ahmed 50 times.
Ahmed 50 times. Shift enter. Okay, Ahmed 50 times. Okay يا شباب؟
Doctor,
نعم.
how can we multiply a string times an integer?
Well, this is what this is what we are explaining. You know, what does it mean to multiply a string by an integer? Well, it means that you want to repeat the string this number of times. That's what it means.
So we can multiply, but we cannot add, right?
Yes, if you add both of, يعني, addition is basically concatenation. Concatenation, both arguments should be strings. Okay, both arguments should be strings. طيب, can you do it like this? 50 times can we do it like this? Would it also repeat the hyphen 50 times? Well, the answer is yes. So you can do it both ways. Okay, you can do it both ways.
Doctor?
Right. Now,
Could we say like 49 and a half? What happens if we do this?
I think it might give an error. How is
Yeah.
it going to repeat it 0.5 times? Can't multiply sequence by non-integer of type 4.
So if we put 1.0, it will not work too?
It might not work too because of the type. So 49.0, yes, it will not work because it's a float.
دكتور,
Now,
since the multiplication, here it's multiplication, right?
here it is repetition.
Repetition, okay, not multiplication.
Yes, it's repetition.
الدكتور 49 ليه مخبطت هنا 49.0
لأنه 49.0 is a float, is not an integer.
شكرا.
Okay. طيب. Since we cannot concatenate a string and an integer, Python provides the str function to convert an integer to a string. Okay. Assume that you want to concatenate 1, 2, 3 to your name, right? 1, 2, 3 to your name. Now, 1, 2, 3 is an integer. I cannot concatenate a string and an integer. But if I, use str, it will convert what the argument from an integer to a string. So, for example, your emails. If this is your ID, I can form your email, from concatenating s with strid and then the rest of the email. So if I run this, you will see that I'll get the email address. Okay. But just like I can convert a number to a string, I can also convert a string to a number, provided that the string actually represents a number. Provided that the string actually represents a number. Now, how can I do that? Well, I can use it using the int and the float. Okay, I can do that using the int and float. So if I use the int, what the string should represent an integer. If I use a float, the string may represent an integer or a float. Okay, but nothing other than that. So for example, ID equal int, 1729. Well, 1729 is an integer. Right? 17.29 is a float. So I can use float. In this case. So if I put shift enter here, you will see that this is printed and this is printed. Okay, so it converts the ID. Now the ID becomes an integer and the price becomes a float. Right? Could I have used the float here for the ID?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. But look at what happened to it. It is a
Decimal.
float. It's a float. So 0.0, this means that the type of ID now is a float, is not an integer. Now, this will have, by the way, a very important consequence when we talk about input and output. When we talk about input and output, we will notice that not usually, always, the input is taken as a string by Python. So now, if you want to read a number, all what you need to do is, if you are not sure whether it is float or integer, read it as a float, right? And then see whether you can convert it to an integer or not. Okay, and this will make reading basically much easier in Python than other languages, as you might see in C or in other languages. تفضل.
دام فضلك دكتور، الانتجر شنو فائدة كتابة الانتجر؟ ما اقدر احط بدالها مثلا برنت؟
I didn't understand your question.
كيف؟
I did not understand your question.
الحين لما احط مثلا برنت بعدين احط رقم نفسه.
طيب.
نفس الشيء لما احط انتجر وبعدين احط الرقم.
انتجر.
هم اثنينهم راح يصدرون لي الرقم صح؟
هلا يعني basically if I type print 1729 like this,
مثلا
طيب what's the advantage of this and this you mean؟
لا هذه والأول واحدة قبل لا تغيرها كانت انتجر.
قبل ما اغيرها كانت
الفلوت كانت انتجر.
كانت انتجر. طيب
ايش الفرق بينها وبين برنت اللي تحت؟
ما في فرق.
ما في فرق أبد.
ما في فرق، لكن نوتس الارجيومنت هنا ايش؟
اها لازم
الارجيومنت
نحط
هنا
لك
string.
quotation.
الارجيومنت هنا string.
تمام.
هنا صارت after this assignment it became an integer. Okay.
اي شكرا.
أيوة. طيب so
دكتور
نعم
إذا تسمح، أنا لو ترجع للسلايد اللي قبل شوي، أنا ممكن أخلي الآي دي يعني مثلا أمسح الفانكشن حقت اللي هو الانتجر. طيب يصير بيبقى عندي string بس.
صحيح.
الآن أروح للبرنت أقول له برنت انتجر اي دي، نفس الشيء بيطلع لي صح، بيطلع لي على انه انتجر.
صحيح. يعني if you do it like this you mean؟
ايه
Yes. It will be printed as an integer, and if you use the float it will be printed as a float.
كمان.
This is what we took day before yesterday. طيب. So strings are sequences of, as we said, Unicode characters. Individual characters of a string can be accessed based on their position. We call it the index. Okay, we call it the index. And the indices in Python start from position 0, and then followed by position 1, and then followed by position 2, until you reach position the length minus 1. Okay, until you reach the position length minus 1. So for example, if I have name equal Harry, basically at index 0 I have the H, at index 1 I have the A, at index 2 I have the R, at index 3 I have the R, and at index 4 I have the Y, right? I have the Y. So what will be printed in this case? Yalla, on the chat. On the chat, what will be printed? يا شباب شو قلنا لكم؟ شغلوا الكاميرا.
راح ينطبع هاري اتش ما راح ينطبع مع ار اتش ار.
طيب until now wrong. كل الانسرز are wrong.
First one is Harry and the second one is RY. The two letters RY.
Until now, all your answers are wrong on the chat. Wrong. ايرور. ليش ايرور يا خالد؟
لا خلاص سحبت الايرور.
سحبت.
راح
الاول والثاني بيكون واي.
والثاني بيكون واي. طيب ما فيهم سبيس بينهم؟ طيب اول واحد خالد الشوشان. خالد الشوشان اول واحد، وراه بدر. شايفين يا شباب؟ هذه برنت ستيتمنت وفي بينها كوما. مش قلنا البرنت ستيتمنت لما يكون في by the way this is a good place for multiple choice tricky questions for multiple choice tricky questions. ترى I could have done this صح؟ and in this case I will get the H connected to the Y, and in this case I will get the H connected to the Y. be careful يا شباب be careful. طيب. Okay. So as we said, the index value must be within the valid range of character positions from 0 to len name minus 1. Otherwise, an index out of range exception will be generated at runtime. There is an exception, by the way, ya shabab. If you use here minus 1, if you use minus 1, it will also work. It will start going backwards, okay? Minus 1 will be basically, this is minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4. And I think there is minus 5. خليني بس اتأكد. Do I
الدكتور
have a
ماينس
minus- Yes. لكن روح للماينس 6. ايش راح يعطيك؟ index. فماينس 6 and below و5 and above will give errors. Okay, minus 6 and below, 5 and above will give errors. Whatever is in between, it depends whether you go forward or backward. Okay, كم. Okay. طيب يلا يا شباب بسرعة. يلا on the chat. What is the result of this statement?
بايثون.
I want to see it. Python. ممتاز. Okay. So the result here is Python. مين يقول لي ليش why did it give me an error? On the chat. Why did it give me an error? On the chat. مين الشباب اللي منتبهة؟ separate commands. ايش قصدك separate commands يا فيصل؟
يعني كود في سكشن والكود الثاني في السكشن الثاني ما في
أي.
نفس الميموري.
والكود الثاني did we execute it ولا لا؟ We did not execute it صح؟ string has not been defined yet. Okay? String has not been defined yet. Now string is defined, and if I can run it, we will get the Python. Okay? And if I run it, we will get the Python. ممتاز. طيب. So here, what's the result of this? طلعوا هنا. I need to see the result on the chat again. I need to see the result on the chat. Please enter your name. Why did you concatenate please to enter يا حمد? Didn't you notice هنا طلع في space صح؟ There is a space, right? So it will print it like this. Please enter your name. Please enter your name. Okay.
دكتور, how did we get error in the last question?
طب لازم تكونوا منتبهين معنا. Who can answer him? You mean here صح؟
Yes.
Who can answer him يا شباب?
We execute before we defined.
We execute the print string before we execute this cell where we define the variable string. That's right. Okay. طيب. Hey. يلا يا شباب on the chat. What's the result of if I run this, shift enter, and now I want to print team equal. What will be printed? يلا مين الأول واحد على الشات؟ أول واحد صح. The first one right. Not yet يا بدر. Look at the print statement. Look at the print statement. One of you, sent me that, he submitted the homework, but he lost 3 points. And the reason why he lost 3 points, because he did not use the exact same print statement as in the homework problem, in the, programming part of the homework problem. فأيوة فيصل همام Badr now got it. So team equals 49ers. By the way, this is one of the, I think one of the teams in the States, 49ers. طيب. Okay, so if I execute this and then I come here, it will be, what will be printed?
Doctor, may you please zoom in?
May I please zoom in? I may very well zoom in. Control plus.
Thank you.
Is this fine?
Yes.
Okay, so it will print n equal 5. محمد النجار, you didn't worry about the spaces, لكن همام was very obvious about spaces, بس برضه غلطان همام. ترى إذا بتلاحظوا في عندي سبيس هنا، فكم سبيس راح يكون بين الايكوال ساين والان؟ راح يكون 2 سبيسز صح؟ 1 2 يكون 2 سبيس. اوكي يا شباب، شايفين وين ال where questions you know. طيب يلا يا شباب، هالمرة ما في tricks. You just need to execute this statement and tell me what will be printed on the chat. What will be printed? طيب بدر he said OOH. ليش OOH؟
I
طيب.
think it's a reaction.
اوكي. طيب. اوكي عبد المجيد you put a space. شو قلت لكم يا شباب؟ هذه tricks. This is not a comma in a print statement. This is not a comma in a print
But
statement.
I think that we had before that space and the plus, and it was separated between each other.
It will only be separated if it was inside the print statement and the arguments are separated by commas. But here we are using the concatenation. Okay, here we are using the concatenation, so they will not be separated. Okay? They will not be separated. واضح يا شباب؟ again, the best thing to study is to solve exercises and solve exercises in the book. Inshallah, I mean, through your connections, I think now you have the a PDF يعني of one of the versions of that. طيب. So let's look at input and output. So basically asking the user to provide input values makes programs more flexible as opposed to having fixed values. For example, you know, you will have to change the values first and second in the program below every time you would like to use different values. For example, here, for example, you run it because you want to print the initials and, you know, R and S. طيب, now I want to change the names. Now, if I want to change the names, then I will have to come here, come inside my program, you know, change my code, okay, change my code, and run it. And in fact, if during changing my code, if by mistake, for example, I do this, if by mistake I do this, what will happen? It will give an error. It will give an error. So it's better that I can, if there is a way that I can get input from the user. Because if I can get input from the user, I don't have to change the code. I compile and run the same code. صح؟ The only thing that changes is the user input. The only thing that changes is the user input. So what do we do in this case? So when a program asks for user input, it should first print a message, which is called the prompt. Okay, and Python actually provides a very easy way of having a prompt. You will find in other languages, even in Java or C, that it is kind of it's not that intuitive, right? Here, I think it is intuitive and simple. So in Python, displaying a prompt and reading the keyboard input are basically combined in one operation. And that operation or that function is basically called the input function. That function is called the input function. Okay. So what is the argument of the input function? The prompt. This is the prompt. This is what will show on the screen. Okay. This is what will show on the screen. So now, for example, if I run this code, enter your first name. I put my first name. Enter your second or last name. So I will say, and I will make a mistake. I will, do it like this. Well, it's running, and interestingly enough, it is running even correctly because the mistake does not affect the output. The mistake does not affect the output. Okay, so this is the nice thing about the input, that being able to take input from the user, So note that the output of the input function is always a string. The output is always a string. If it was not a string, by the way, well, let me ask you this question. خلينا نشوف مين اللي صاحي ومين اللي نايم. This code proves that the output of the input function is a string. Who can tell me why? This code. تفضل.
لأنه قاعدين نستخدم البراكتس هذيك اللي فيها زيرو العملية.
يعني قاعدين نستخدم البراكتس اللي فيها زيرو. لا. There is a proof.
على
نجمع strings.
ايوه ايش نجمع ايش؟
strings.
ايوه we are concatenating. This is what is this يا شباب؟
plus sign.
هذه البلس ساين حرام عليك.
اللي صار.
الامبرساند.
This one is a string. صح؟ This one is a string. And I'm using the plus sign. So this means that هلا فهمت عليكم يا شباب. معلش اول واحد الشاب اللي جاوب ترى كلامه صح كمان. Because he said you said because we are using these two صح؟ the square brackets, because this is the index. We don't access the index of a number. We access the index of a string. You are absolutely right, and I apologize. Okay, you are absolutely right, and I apologize. And what I had in mind, since this is a string, we are concatenating already strings, صح? But this is not first. This is not the whole. This is not the whole string. It's only a character of the string. So you are also absolutely right, because we are using also the index. Although, by the way, we will see that lists also have have this. Okay, but anyways, so this is good. So the output of the input statement is always a string. طيب, I want to read an integer. I want to read a number. What should I do?
Use the integer and float function.
Use the int and the float function. Use the int and float function, right? So please enter the number of bottles. We store it in user input, and then we can say int user input. Even better, we can do it in one shot. We can say float and then enter the volume of each bottle. Okay, and taking the input. And as you can see, this is the preferred style. Instead of using two lines, you just do it in one line. Okay, you just do it in one line. So if I do this, enter the number of bottles, 10 bottles, enter the volume of each bottle, 2.3, then it will tell you the number of bottles is 10 and the bottle volume is 2.2. Okay, so this is the preferred form of the reading numerically. Right. Now we will talk about formatted output. This is the last thing that we will do in this chapter. How do we format output? Well, when you print the result of a computation, you often want to control its appearance. You know, how does it look? For example, assume that you want to print the price per liter. You want to print the price per liter. Now, if you do the computation, you know, it will give you this big number, 1.2159, right? But you really don't want to print that. You just want to print, for example, 1.22. You just want to print 1.22. So can you do that in Python?
Use round.
Yes, use the round function.
No, we will not use the round function. We will not use the round function. We will use what is called the string format operator. We will use the string format operator, okay? Which is basically the same as the mod, okay? Same as the mod, but here since the operands are basically strings, it is called the string format. It is called the string format operator. So the following command displays the price with 2 digits after the decimal point. So if you do something like this, so this is the string format operator. This is the variable that you would like to print. And now it says here, you know, %, and then you say .2f. .2f. Now, what does the .2f mean? Well, it means that I want to print only the first 2 digits in the string, the first 2 decimals in the number. Only the first 2 decimals in the number. So if I do shift enter, you will notice here that 1.22 is printed. You will notice here that 1.22 is printed. Okay? Right. Okay. So you can also specify a field width. You know how much space do you want the printout to be? Okay. How much space do you want the printout to be? By the way, including the spaces. Okay, including spaces. And when I say including spaces, this is in the case when, you know, the string is actually small and the number or the width is, the length is big. So you need to add spaces, you know, you need to add spaces. So for example, look at this, 10.2f, 10.2f % price. Now, how is this going to be printed? Well, I know that I'm going to take only 2 decibels, صح? These are 2 locations. تمام؟
0.1.
These are 2 locations. ايش قصدك 0. No, this is 10,
معلش.
10.2. This is 10.2.
هل راح تودي الواحد تخليها 0.1.22؟
لا what did I say? It will not add zeros. It will add spaces. Okay, it will add spaces. فهنا مثلا خلينا نشوف كم اللينث. 2 decimals, so 1 2, of course the 1 will be 2 2 2 صح? So these are 2, and then we have the decimal point 3, and then we have the 1 4. طيب أنا عندي هنا 10. So what do I do with the other 6? Well, ال 10 هذه يا شباب positive ولا negative?
Positive.
Positive. So since it is positive, I will add spaces to the
right, left.
Okay, I'll add spaces to the left. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. أكمل ما حيكمل خلاص. واضح يا شباب؟ Whereas if you do negative, it will add spaces to the right. Okay, when you do negative, it will add spaces to the right. So if I run this, طلعوا يا شباب, if I start, شايفين هنا هذا جزء من this cell, So I'm starting with this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 وخلاص. إذا فهمتوا هذه يا شباب خلاص الباقي كله إن شاء الله راح يكون سهل. When it is positive, we add spaces to the left. When it is negative, we add spaces to the right. طيب, if the number was lesser, then there will be no spaces. يعني مثلا, when you say here 2.2f. When you say here 2.2f. طيب, هلا ال 0.2 قلنا 2 decimals. صح؟ طيب, وهنا الاثنين. طيب, ما أنا I already have 2 decimals. How come you put here 2? I need at least 3 مثلا or 4. But it doesn't matter. It will print it as is. Because it will not add any spaces. طيب, مين اللي كان عم يسأل؟
Yes, Doctor. I couldn't really understand it very well. Could you please give another example to explain it?
هي ال other examples جاية ترى. Okay. Let's see. So as I said, the 10.2f is called a format specifier. This is the format specifier. See what happens when you play with the values of the format specifier. We already did that. طيب, نرجع مرة ثانية. خلينا نحط هنا ال 10.2f with a price. Okay. What do we do? How do we print this? Or how do we interpret this? Well, we interpret this the following way. أول شيء, ال 0.2, this will tell you that you are going to have only 2 decimals after the decimal point. Okay? And in this case, it will be 2. تمام? طيب, what does the 10 going to tell you? The 10 tells you that the whole number will occupy 10 locations. At least. Will occupy 10 locations at least. Okay? طيب, how many locations now do I have? Well, with 2, this is 2 locations. 3.14. صح? I'm left with 6 because I have here 10. So what do I do? Add spaces. Where do I add spaces? Depends on the sign. If it is positive, it will add spaces to the left. If it is negative, it will add spaces to the right. If it is negative, it will add spaces to the right. So if I do this and I run it, you will see that the spaces were added to the left. واضح يا شباب؟
Doctor,
نعم.
the number actually is 1.21. It will be rounded up like instantly with this function.
Well, yes, it will be rounded because of the 5.9.
Okay.
Because of the 5.9.
الدكتور
what if
لو
طيب ايوه
لو ابيها مثلا على سبيل المثال 3 ديسيمالز احط
3 ديسيمالز بتحط هنا 3.
يعني 2 اللي تو كانت مو الرقم الاول من المساله.
لا
انا حسبت
لا. This is the number of decimals. Okay,
شكرا.
this is the number of decimals. So now if I run this, as you can see, because this is 5, since this is 9, it became 6. It became 6. طيب, على الشات يا شباب, what will be printed if I do this on the chat and try to observe the number of spaces? يلا. Try to observe the number of spaces. You did not observe the spacing يا عبد المجيد. أو you use the spaces اللي هي تكون والله أنت ما أنت حاطط ولا سبيس يا عبد المجيد. وبعدين حتى الرقم تبع غلط ترى 1.21 زي ما الشباب اللي تحت محمد النجار واحمد
معلش تعجل الدكتور، نسيت الواحد اللي كان بين الواحد
ايه
5. 2 و5.
تمام. Okay, Muhammad al-Najjar, now he's using hyphens to show spaces. How many hyphens? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, because these are six. Well, most probably this is a correct answer, صح? So I will have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces with 1.2160. ممتازين. واضح يا شباب؟ واضح؟
Why we put double quotation for this operation?
You mean this double quotation?
Yes.
Because this is required by the format string operator. This is called the format string operator. So before it, you will put the format specifier, and after it, you will put the variable. After it, you will put the variable. Okay. طيب, what if you have two variables? What if you have two variables? Well, if you have two variables, you will put them in between brackets, and you will separate them as we will see later. Okay. طيب, let's take an integer format with a string format, and then we will leave something for next week. So for integers, we use %d. For integers, and in %d there is no decimals, صح? There is no decimal point. It's just, based on, the length of the string, you will determine how many spaces do you need. Here, for example, are we going to add any spaces?
No.
No, there is no number specified before the d. There is no number specified before the d. So as you can see, there are no spaces. There are no spaces. طيب. But if we do, for example, 5 or -5, well, now we are going to have some spaces, and these spaces are to the left because it is minus. Okay. If we do plus, it will be to the right. It will be to the right. If I have a string value, I use to the left. Yes, yes.
قصدك العكس يا دكتور، من
أنا قصدي العكس.
اذا كان موجب يصير من اليسار ولا
إذا كان positive from the spaces from the left و negative spaces from the right. Yes. أنا معلش. بتصير. طيب. Last thing, %s for string values. We basically use, %s, and in a similar way, we have, for example, here price. When we say -10s, let's see what will happen. Look at this. -10s, we add spaces to the left, صح? To the right, يا ربي, to the right. So we have 1, we start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we have 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, and 10. And if I make it positive, then the spaces will be to the left. The spaces will be to the left. Okay, Shabab. So let's stop here. This is a good place to stop. We should have finished this whole thing, but we couldn't. That's fine. So inshallah we will do it بإذن الله later. طيب. Any questions يا شباب before we break?
دكتور.
نعم.
عندي سؤال بس بخصوص الواجب بس.
تفضل.
الحين بالواجب لما اجي اسوي البارت 2 سبمت، هل اسوي سبمت الملفين يعني كل تاسك يعني اسوي الحاله يعني ولا وشو ولا نفس الملف؟
لا مو نفس الملف. انت البارت 2 you need to submit 2 Python files اللي هو .py files، صح؟
اي نعم.
فانت لما تحل، بعد ما تحل وتخلص الحل،
ايوه،
you uncomment اول لاين في السيل تبع الحل تبعك، علشان
أيوة.
اذا عملت شيفت انتر راح يعمل كرييشن لهذا الملف.
اوكي.
من جوا الجوبيتر. وبعدين بتروح للثاني نفس الشيء، بس خلصت الحل بتصير تعمل انكومنت وبعدين شيفت انتر. طبعا اذا حبيت تغير حلك معناته لازم تحط الكومنت باك علشان تعمل رن للكود يعني. اوكي. فبعد ما تعمل كرييشن لهالتو فايلز تاكد انه هدول التو فايلز هم التو فايلز اللي بدك اياهم، وبعدين بتاخذهم بالدراج اند دروب تروح بتحطهم بالجريد سكوب.
طيب يعطيك العافيه.
دكتور اعاده كلامك، يعني اللي هو الكومنت السيل اللي فيها البرمجه، احط اول سطر فيه كومنت عشان يحفظ لي الملف يعني منفصل؟
لا هو اول سطر اذا بدا ببرسنت ترى البرسنت اسمها ماجيك، الماجيك فانكشنز في البايثون. طيب فيعني لها معنى محدد، فاحنا لما بنعملها كومنت هذا لانه وي دونت ونت تو ران. اوكي، لما بنسوي لها كومنت وي دونت ونت تو ران. لكن انت بعد ما تخلص الكود تبعك، لازم تشيل والله ماني عارف، انا عندي do I have خليني بداية شوي بس اشوف اذا خليني اروح على البلاك بورد، خليني اعمل شير للسكرين على هذا عشان اشرح لكم اياها. شو رايكم؟ وين راحت البلاك بورد يا شباب؟ اللي بده يروح ها. ترى خلصنا المحاضرة خلصت. whoever wants to leave he can leave.
يعطيك العافيه دكتور.
الله يعافيك. مرة. اوكي assignments، وهذا خليني اعمل save download show in folder control F and let me move it to files. اوكي طيب خلينا نشوف اذا نقدر نشوف الان. هل اوكي شايفين يا شباب؟
اي نعم دكتور.
Are you able to see؟ شايفين؟
Yes.
فهنا انت الان احنا بدينا الكود بكذا صح؟ So here you will be writing your code. تمام؟ الان افرض انك خلصت، عملت له رن وشيكت عليه وكان كل شيء تمام، ايش راح تسوي؟ راح تيجي هنا وراح تشيل هذا. الان لاحظتوا اول ما شلت الكومنت ايش صار بالالوان؟ اتعرف عليه انه هذا كوماند. طيب الان when I run this if I say shift enter، اذا سويت shift enter شوف شو جاب لك هنا، قال لك writing homework 1 question 14.py، معناته it created a file called homework 1 question 14.py. اذا برجع هنا للدايركتوري ترى شوفوا هي موجود homework 1. خليني اذا بروح على السيل هنا let me open it using notepad++. شوفوا فالملف جاهز. فانت بعد لما once you create this file and if you finish also the second question بعدين بتشيل هذا الباوند تعمل shift enter. الان اذا بتروح للدايركتوري عندك الملفين، تاخذ هالملفين وبتروح تعمل دراج اند دروب وين؟ على جريد سكوب. وصلى الله وبارك.
الله يعطيك العافيه دكتور، ما قصرت.
وبعدين يا دكتور مثلا لو بغيت اعدل عليه احط كومنت اعدل.
ايوه الان بدك تغير الكود، اكتشفت انه في غلط، معناته ايش اسوي؟ اذا بتعمل شيفت انتر راح يرجع يطبع نفس الملف صح؟ فانت
أيوه.
فانت بتعمل كومنت خلص، واحد ولا 10 خلص انت عملت كومنت. الان رجع هذا كود سيل عادي بتكتب فيه بايثون ويو ران ات ويو دو وات ايفر يو ونت.
تمام يا دكتور، يعطيك العافيه دكتور.
الله يعافيك. طيب خلاص يبقى خليني بس